If you're interested in adding chromatic notes to your lead playing, you need to check out chromatic enclosures. This is the idea of using chromatic passing tones to target a note from above and below. I'm going to use a simple phrasing template and 2 basic arpeggios to demonstrate 8 different lines using this concept. Let's get into it. So let's jump right in. These first 4 lines are going to work over a major 2-5-1 chord progression. Now we're in the key of E flat major, so our chords are F minor 7, our 2 chord, B flat 7, our 5 chord, and then E flat major 7, our 1 chord. Now we're going to use a chromatic enclosure as a rhythmic pickup to target the chord tones of our F minor 7 chord at the top of each phrase. So to start, we're going to target the root, right? This F note right here. And we're going to play this little enclosure. We're going to start down on E flat, then come up to G, then to G flat, then to E, and then up to F. So that right there is our chromatic enclosure. We're playing 2 notes above and then 1 note below, all to target the root of this F chord. From here, we're going to play up an F minor scale, part of an F minor scale. Then walk chromatically into the 3rd of our 5 chord, our B flat 7 chord. Then play up a D diminished arpeggio. And then come down and walk chromatically up to the 3rd of our E flat chord. And that's another little chromatic enclosure we're sneaking in there. All right, that's a note above and then 2 chromatic notes below to target the 3rd of our E flat chord. So now I'll play this line along to a backing track and I'll repeat it 3 times through. All right, so now we're just going to move up this F minor 7 arpeggio. We targeted the root in that last line. Now we're going to move up to the minor 3rd, this note A flat. And we're going to play a very similar chromatic enclosure. So here we're starting on G, then coming up to B flat, down to A, back down to G, and then finding our way to this A flat note. Then from here, we're going to play very similar stuff to what we played in the last phrase. We're going to actually come up part of an A flat major 7 arpeggio, then find our way to the 3rd of our B flat chord, play up our D diminished arpeggio again, and then play this chromatic enclosure to the 3rd of our E flat. But instead of coming down to the 5th, I'm going to end this by hitting the major 7 of our E flat major 7 chord. So a slight variation, but very similar information in this line. So we've got these 2 great chromatic enclosures right within this line. And so again, I'll play it along to the track. Here's what it sounds like. Alright, so let's continue making our way through this F minor 7 arpeggio. We started with the root, then the minor 3rd, now we're moving on to the 5th, the note C. And for this we're going to start down on B flat, come up to D flat, then back down to B flat, walk up chromatically to C. And again, this is our rhythmic pickup leading into the downbeat where we start the chord progression. From here, we're going to come down an F minor scale and then use another chromatic enclosure to target the third of our B flat 7 chord. All right, this is, again, playing a chromatic note above, 2 chromatic notes below, to target this D note, which is the major third of our B flat chord. So. Then from here, we're going to play up our D diminished arpeggio. And then use another chromatic enclosure to target the third of our E flat chord. So 2 very similar moves. And then we just move that up 1 string to grab the third of the E flat chord. So all that together. Now here's what it sounds like along to the backing track. Again, I'll play it 3 times through. Alright, so we've got one more note to our F minor 7 arpeggio. We played the root, the minor third, the 5th, and finally we have the flat 7, the note E flat. So for this, we're going to start down a half step on D, and then come up to F, then down a half step to E, and then back down to our D, and then finally land on our target note, this E flat note. Then from here, we're going to come down similarly, playing an F minor scale. And then walk up chromatic, again to the third of our B flat 7 chord. Up our D diminished arpeggio. And then again, another chromatic enclosure to find the third of our E flat 7 chord. So basically the same thing we played down here. But moved up the fretboard and on a lower set of strings. But working these things out around the fretboard is great to give you different vocabulary to play over this type of chord progression wherever you wind up in your improvising. So here's what this line sounds like 3 times along to the backing track. All right, so for these next 4 examples, we're going to change the chord progression a little bit. We're still going to be in the same key, but now we're going to use a minor 2-5-1. And we're going to base this around the relative minor chord of an E flat major. So the relative minor of E flat major is C minor 7. Right? So our minor 2-5-1 would use a D half diminished chord or minor 7 flat 5 chord to a G7 chord. And then finally to our C minor 7 chord. Now, this D half diminished chord has a lot of similarities to an F minor 7 chord. It actually has an F minor triad right in it with a D in the bass. So I tend to look at this chord as like a voicing for an F minor 6 chord. Right? It has the the F minor triad, the F, A flat, and C within it. But instead of having the E flat, it has a D. Right? So very similar. In fact, 3 of the notes are the same. So 3 of our chromatic enclosures, 3 of the chord tones we're going to target at the top of this 2-5-1 progression are going to be the same. Of course, the G7 is different than the B flat 7, so it's going to lead us in a different way to a different place, and then we're going to resolve to C minor 7. But let's jump into this first minor 2-5-1 line. All right, so just like we did before, we're going to work through the 4 notes of this D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio and use chromatic enclosures as a rhythmic phrasing tool to get to the top of the chord progression. So this first one, we're going to target the note D, the root note of the chord, and we're going to start down on C, come up to E flat, and then walk chromatically from C up to D. All right, so there's our chromatic enclosure at the top of the phrase. Then from here, we're just going to come up this D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. And then we're going to do a similar chromatic enclosure right here to target the root of our G7 chord as the chord change happens. So then from here, we're just going to work our way up a G7 arpeggio. There's root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7. Then we're going to play this little line to make our way back to a chord tone of our C minor 7 chord. This is the final chord we're heading to in this chord progression. And we're going to land on the note G, which is the 5th of the chord. So that's our line. Here's what it sounds like 3 times along to the backing track. So this next phrase is going to target F, which is the 2nd note of our D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. We've got D, the root, and then F, the minor 3rd. And for this, we're going to use the exact same chromatic enclosure we used previously, this example right here. Right, so starting on E flat, coming up to G, then down to G flat, then E, and then finally targeting F. All right, so we're going to use that exact same phrase, but instead of playing over an F minor 7 like we did before, now we've got this D half diminished chord. So we're going to play right out of a D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Right, so kind of a big stretch, but a nice sounding little arpeggio move. Then from here, we're making our way to G7, finally C minor 7. So I'm seeing these chord voicings right here, this G7 to this C minor 7. And I'm going to play out of basically you could look at this as an A flat diminished arpeggio, right, which is kind of giving you the sound of a G7 flat 9 chord that resolves really nicely to C minor. Right, so that's the tail end of the line, but we start with this basic chromatic enclosure. Right, so kind of a cool line that moves around, makes its way across different parts of the fretboard. So here's what it sounds like to the backing track. So these next couple examples use similar enclosures as we used in our previous examples over the F minor 7, since we're working with the same notes. This next line is going to start out by targeting this A flat, right? We played our D, we played our F, now we're playing the A flat, which is the flat 5 of our minor 7 flat 5 chord. So we're going to use that same exact chromatic enclosure we played before, starting on G, coming up to B flat, down a half step, back to G, and then chromatic up to A flat. So 2 chromatic notes above, 1 chromatic note below to target that note. Then from here, we're going to play a little piece of that D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Then coming down, targeting the 3rd of our G7 chord, and that's another chromatic enclosure right there. Again, just bouncing around to target the 3rds of these chords. We're going to finally land on E flat, which is the 3rd of our C minor 7 chord. So. Right, and you can mess around with this a lot of different ways, phrasing it different ways. You could play, right, or different songs, different tempos, different feels are going to give you different amounts of time to kind of fit notes in there. So you play around with the phrasing a little bit. One of the great things about these chromatic enclosures is that you kind of have a target destination in mind, and then the chromatic notes give you a way of filling up the space, depending on how busy you want the line to be, depending on how much time you have in the bar to get where you're heading to. So here's what this line sounds like along to the backing track. So the 4th and final note of this D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio is the flat 7, the note C. So we can use the same chromatic enclosure we used before for C. Right, starting on B flat, coming up to D flat, half step above the target note, and then again chromatic from B flat up to C. Then from here, we're going to kind of work down basically an F minor scale. And then target the 3rd of our G7 chord. Again, I'm kind of always seeing these chord voicings and visualizing the arpeggios that fit along with them so I can target these chord tones, right? So, then from here, I'm going to play up what's basically a B diminished arpeggio, giving you that G7 flat 9 sound. And then from here, I'm going to play some colorful notes to land on the C minor. I'm going to slide up to the minor 3rd, and then I'm going to grab the 9 on top to kind of give us this C minor 9 sound, right? Which is just a pretty note choice, a little bit of a different variation than always targeting the 3rd or the root or a chord tone. Just giving a little bit of a colorful option that sounds good in this instance. So. So a really nice, pretty little 2-5-1 line to cover these chords. So one last time, here's what it sounds like along to the backing track. So these These 8-lick examples are all very much in the bebop jazz style of chromatic enclosures. But I encourage you to experiment with this concept, break it apart, and apply it to different songs that you're playing. I use this kind of stuff in straight ahead blues all the time. It can be a really great tool when you're trying to figure out ways to make music out of arpeggio shapes that you have. If you kind of know the basic chord tones where they are and you're comfortable targeting them on the downbeat of the chord, try using chromatic enclosures as a rhythmic device to lead you in to target those chord tones on the downbeat when the chord change happens. This is the way I use this stuff all the time. It works in a whole range of styles. Of course, it works really well over kind of swing or shuffle rhythms, but it's just a great tool to have in your arsenal. So until next time, happy practicing and take care.